Hello, tonight our video is on subtracting integers. Alright, so we've been working with positive and negative integers, and we even had a video on adding integers together. So here we have the expression 2 minus 5. So we're subtracting two integers. Now, if I do this on the number line, the number 2 is right here, 2 units to the right of 0. If I minus 5, that means I'm going to the left 5. So 1, 2 gets me back to 0. Then 3, 4, 5 puts me at negative 3 on the number line. So the answer to this expression would equal negative 3. Now let's point something out here. If I started with 2 and I added to that number, negative 5, I would also get the same result. So imagine a number line where the frog jumps 2 to the right, that's plus 2, but then jumps 5 backwards to the left. Alright, that's the exact same thing as taking 2 and subtracting 5. So this brings us to one principle that we can write down. Subtraction, and write this in your notes. Subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. And this is something that you can use to your advantage when you're simplifying these expressions that have negative integers. Alright, so what we mean by this is that if I take away 5 from a number, that's identical to adding the opposite of 5. That's what this means right here. Subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. So subtracting 5 is the same as adding the opposite of 5. Alright, so here we have a similar expression, but it's a little different. We're starting off at negative 2, and we're subtracting 5 again. So we'd be moving 5 in the negative direction. Now where would that put us on the number line? Where would we end up? That's right, we'd end up at negative 7. Alright, so let's apply what we just wrote down on the previous slide. Let's apply that subtracting is the same as adding the opposite. I'm going to rewrite this expression as negative 2, and instead of minus 5, I'm going to write plus negative 5. Okay, so I just applied that very note that we wrote down. So here, I would suggest when we're subtracting and we're dealing with negatives that you use this, because it's very clear to me, and hopefully clear to you, that if you start with a negative 2 and you add another negative 5, you end up with a negative 7. It just makes it a little clearer, I think. And this also leads to another note that we can put down, is that when you add signs, or excuse me, when you add numbers that have the same sign. So add numbers with the same sign, just add and keep the sign. So what do we mean by this? When we add numbers with the same sign, we just add them and keep the sign. Well, take for instance 5 plus 2. You have no problem in adding those together and saying the answer is 7. You added a positive 5, you added a positive 2, so you added them together and you kept the sign. It's still positive. Well, it's the same thing when you add negative numbers. If I add negative 5 and I add negative 2, I would add them together and I would keep the sign. So it would be negative 7. And hopefully that makes sense. If I took $2 out of the bank and then I took another $5 out of the bank, I would have taken a total of $7 out of the bank. All right, here are a couple examples. Let's go ahead and rewrite them using that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. So 1 minus 4, I'm going to rewrite that as 1 plus negative 4. Okay? So I start off with 1, and now I'm going to add a negative 4. So where would we end up? That's right, we'd end up at negative 3. And if you use the number line, that's fine. You start with 0, you go 1 to the right, that puts you at 1, and then you go backwards 4, that puts you at negative 3. Okay, the next example, we have negative 2 minus 3. Let's go ahead and rewrite this as negative 2 plus the opposite of 3, right? Taking away 3 is the same as adding negative 3. Okay, we just wrote about this. We have two numbers that have the same sign. So I don't even need to use a number line. I can just add those together and keep the sign. So that would equal negative 5. Okay? How you doing so far? All right, make sure you have those down, and let's continue. Okay, this first one at the top, well, we've practiced this a few times. We have the opposite of negative 4. And then we're subtracting 4. All right? And then the second problem, we have 6. We're taking away a negative 3. And the third problem, we have negative 3, and we're taking away a negative 5. I want you to copy those down, pause your video, and work each of them out. All right? Do it on your own, and then restart and see how you did, okay? All right, welcome back from pausing the video. Let's go over the first problem. Now, hopefully you remembered if you take the opposite of a negative 4, that's what that means, that we end up getting 4, positive 4. And so 4 minus 4, well, that equals 0. So how'd you do on that one? Okay, let's go to the next one. So the next one, we have a 6, and we're taking away negative 3. So let's add the opposite. Remember we said subtraction is the same as adding the opposite? So I'm going to take this minus sign, I'm going to change it to adding, and what's the opposite of negative 3? That's right, it's positive 3. All right, so let me go ahead and change that to a plus. So this ends up being actually 6 plus 3, and that equals 9. Did you get that one? Okay, it's okay if you didn't get it, because we're still practicing these, but if you got that, that's awesome. All right, number 3, or the third one. We have a negative 3, and again, we're subtracting a negative 5, so let's add the opposite. We're going to add positive 5. Okay, so I'm at negative 3, and then I add 5. That gets me to positive 2. All right, I think you're ready for the self-quiz. All right, here's the self-quiz. Pause your video, go ahead and work them out, and then restart to check your answers. Welcome back from pausing the video. We have a negative 10, and we're subtracting 10. I'm going to rewrite that. I'm going to rewrite that as negative 10, and subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. So I'm going to put plus negative 10. Oh, okay, so here I have two negative 10s that I'm adding together. So I'm going to add them and keep the sign. The answer is negative 20. Next we have 4 subtract a negative 2. So I'm going to add the opposite. The opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. So 4 plus 2, that equals 6. Okay, and then here, negative 3 subtract 7. So I'm going to add the opposite. The opposite of 7 is a negative 7. So negative 3 plus negative 7, okay, same sign, add and keep. So 3 plus 7 is 10, keep the negative sign. Okay, so how'd you do? All right, well, thank you for watching and listening. And remember, read some books.